Starting the live video, and then it says live for 2 seconds so far. Hey everyone, welcome to Facebook class. Whenever you get here, just go ahead and let me know that you're here. We'll check in. And so I've also got Eric and Mike over here. They're joining us as young Padawans on Facebook. And so if you guys can see here, I can scan up and down. You guys will have to just be patient with me for a minute because I'm going to do teaching in two ways. As I scan down, I can see, Bruce Blackadder is here. Hi, Bruce. Phil and Ruth are here. Hi, Phil and Ruth. And two other people are watching. So I don't know exactly who those two other people are because they snuck in with others. Renee Prinky, Jerry Ford. And so I can scan up and down this if there's an older comment. So we've got Doreen says here. And so we say, hi, Doreen, glad to have you. Larry and Nancy Hibble. Good to have you guys. Judy Hostetter. We've got Phil and Ruth from Apache Junction, Arizona. Dwayne and Renee Prinky are here. So again, all of these comments are just, I'm going to show you these two sketchy looking guys again. So all these comments are just popping up. And, I'm just kind of reading them as they come through there. We've got Cindy Pavey watching as well. So right now my count is at 14. And so we give a few minutes to make sure everyone's here. Everyone say hi to Eric and Mike so that they know that you guys have joined us. So just so everybody knows, I am teaching my class, but I'm also teaching Mike and Eric how to use Facebook. So it might be a little bit disjointed, but we will do our best to do multiple things all at the same time. So we have Rhonda Hall joining us. We've got Cliff Slater, Cindy Pavey. Oh, there's Doreen says hi to Eric and Mike. So Eric and Mike are going to now wave. Yay. Yay. All right. What a wonderful crowd. Jerry Bauer says, my shepherds. Marlene, good to have you here. Amber, glad that you're being a part of the class. We've got a howdy going out to Eric and Mike. We've got Jeff and Rhonda with Trudy and Judy. Well, that's rhymes. We got Tammy O'Shea. Thanks for being here, Tammy. So we just hit a count of 14, 15 went back down, and so then we'll kind of get started here. We're going to start by reminding ourselves of the intro to Psalm 23, and we're going to be looking at verses 1 through 4 to start with. The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So as we kind of review the process, we recognize that this is all on the basis of the fact that the Lord is our shepherd. And as a result, David finds himself lacking nothing, needing nothing, being fully satisfied. And we have highlighted 4 actions of the shepherd. He leads me, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul, and he leads me in the right paths. But it's not until the end of verse 3 that we get kind of the purpose statement, the idea of what this is all about or what it's for. And so in verse 3, in the second part, why is the Lord doing all these things? So go ahead and use your comment feature, and you can type in what is the explanation, the purpose or the reason for God doing these 4 things of making me lie down, leading me beside still waters, restoring my soul, and leading me in the right paths. What does Psalm 23:3 give as the reason or the purpose statement that motivates all these things? While you guys are typing that, I'm going to mention something to Mike and Eric here, which is often whenever I'm wanting them to leave a comment, I'll encourage them to do that. So it might be hard for people to know whether this is a rhetorical question or something I'd actually like to see them answer. And so encouraging them to, you guys to type that in. So anybody see the purpose statement there? Why is the Lord doing all of these things? It's in the latter part of verse 3. And there's also a good lesson here, which is people out there in the internet say, Craig, if you ask me a dumb question, I'm not going to waste my time answering it. So the answer is, there we go. Jerry Bowers got it, for his name's sake. And on my screen, that just kind of popped up, and it's available there Yeah, Bruce mentions also this aspect or this element of preventing want. God wants to provide and wants to sustain. And we do recognize he does that for his own name's sake. Now the question becomes, why does it matter why? Does it really matter if God does it because he's bored? Does it matter if God does it just because he's got nothing better to do? Like, go ahead and use your comment feature and let us know why you think it's important that we know why God does these things. What is the purpose or the function of the why? So go ahead and use your comment feature. Why does the why matter? Why is it important that we know the reason with which God makes me lie down in green pastures? Why is it important that we know why he leads us beside still waters? He restores our soul, and he leads us in the right paths. Now, the other thing I'm going to mention to Eric and Mike here is sometimes questions that take a lot of like real thought process. It's going to be it's tough because this is something that, I don't know. What do you guys say out there? You might be willing to type up to 2 sentences, but beyond 2 sentences, you're just going to say, that's too much work. And so sometimes the responses you can tell just based on the questions that we get. So Doreen mentions here to better relate to him. So it gives us an opportunity to relate. Jerry mentions that it shows us that if David can trust him, that we can trust him too. Bruce mentions that it gives us purpose. I'm going to mention to Eric and Mike, you guys may have missed that, but up here, floating up here, were 2 little thumbs up as people leave reactions, and you just hope for very few smiley or frowns or teardrop faces. Those are not good things, but that will happen here simultaneously. See, Jerry Bowers just did a thumbs up, and I don't know if here somebody do a thumbs up here so Mike and Eric can see live what that looks like. Oh, this is probably a pretty vain thing to do. Like, give me a thumbs up, but we're just wanting to illustrate. So you see they just come there, and then it pops, and it gives you the image of who it is there. So these are all the people who are actually paying attention there along the way. So that's like an online amen, I think is how I interpret it. I'm pretty sure that's what people mean there. Yeah, so the reason matters because we need to know why God is doing these things, because that gets to his nature, it gets to his character or his attributes. And what we find in Psalm 23:3 is the reason he does these things is for his name's sake. Now, for us, name means different things, but I'm going to just kind of summarize this, that name in the Old Testament speaks of a person's character, of their identity, and of their reputation. So those aren't true of us today. My name is Craig, and I believe that means upon a hill. That adds absolutely no significance to my life. But for God, when he speaks of his name, he's speaking of his character, he's speaking about his identity, and he's speaking also about his reputation. So everything is going to rest on God's reputation. So the reason God does these things is so that his character, his identity, and his reputation can remain intact. So if God did not help his people lie down in green pastures, if God did not lead them beside still waters, if God did not restore their soul, if God did not lead them on the right paths, what would that do to God's name? So what would be the implications for God if he did not do these things? So go ahead and use your comment feature. And what do you think are some of the implications for God if he were not to do these things? Again, we're probably clearly aware of the implications for us. I might not get fed or I might not get cared for. But since it's for his name's sake, what would be the implications to the name of God or for the name of God if he did not provide for his people? So go ahead and use the comment feature and let us know what you think is the significance or the importance of realizing he does these things for his name's sake. Yeah, Jerry Bowers mentions that if God didn't do these things, he would not have a good reputation. If someone were to say, for example, I trust in the Lord for deliverance, or I trust in the Lord to provide for me, and if somebody could say, this is not a trustworthy God, this is not a reliable God, then people would begin to question, should I trust in God? Is he reliable? Lori Peterson mentions to bring dishonor. And we would recognize that if God's name is not honored, then all the things that he's doing in here really don't fulfill their ultimate purpose, which is to give God the honor. Jerry Ford mentions that people would not honor or revere him. Cliff Slater mentions that he would be hard to trust. With the Billings Church of Christ, which I'm guessing that must be, that's Eric Peterson. There we go. He would not be glorified. See this? Eric's sitting so quietly over here, and he's just typing in his answers rather than interrupting us with his boisterous voice. So, but yeah, we recognize that God would not be glorified in the process. Eric, that probably gives you an idea too of the delay. I don't know how long that took, but it certainly isn't instantaneous on this end. So everything in this psalm rests on the character, the identity, and the reputation of God. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The reason I'm not wanting is because God is trustworthy. That's his name, his reputation. So I'm not going to be wanting things because I trust that he's providing. If that trust piece falls apart, then this whole psalm, the glue of everything, it falls apart with it. So Phil and Ruth Bullock say he would be neglecting his followers and he would be showing the opposite of his real attributes. Yeah, that if God, if the Lord is my shepherd, therefore I have no one to care for me, therefore I am anemic, therefore I am unprotected, then that would dishonor God's name. People would wonder why this God would be worthy of following. Yeah, Jerry Bowers mentions that it would not show his holiness. Bruce mentioning again that it would show a lack of care or concern for his people. So everything in this psalm rests on the trustworthiness of God. So these things that he's doing, again, he's doing it for his namesake, which is for his character, for his identity, and for his reputation as well. So let me ask the question, what makes somebody trustworthy? So go ahead and use your comment feature, and what do you think makes someone trustworthy? Or maybe we could answer the question, how is trust built? So if we are assuming God's doing all these things for his name's sake, one of the things that we have to realize and think about is how is trust actually built? So use your comment feature. How is it that anyone, God or anyone otherwise, could or does build trust? And while you're answering that question, I'm going to drink water. I told Mike and Eric that it's very bad etiquette to drink water while you're teaching class. So I'm just illustrating both the good and the bad ways to teach. Gay, see, and this is one of the challenge for you guys is some people use their first name and their maiden name and their last name, and then it gets really confusing because I want to call Gay Gobin, but right. I realize it's Gay Colgrove. And then here, if you guys, I'm going to just teach these two here for a second. If you guys will notice, so Gay left the comment integrity there, and there's a thumbs up +1. So they have the opportunity to say, it's kind of like their own little amen for that, and you can see that. And which is, by the way, a very good practice for you guys to go ahead and be encouraging each other who do leave comments with a thumbs up. I don't hit sad faces or tears crying, but hearts, thumbs up are always good. But Gay, again, Colgrove, mentions integrity. That for a person to be trustworthy, when their yes needs to be yes. And it's really hard to establish trust in someone if that's not the case. Doreen mentions fulfilled promises. So if somebody says they're going to do something and they don't, then it's going to be very difficult the next time for us to trust them. Now, I'm going to show Mike and Eric something real quick here, which is sometimes these will automatically pop up, all the comments. But if you've scanned through and you're not at the bottom, they will sit there. So it might look like I don't have any other comments, but I know I'm not at the bottom. And so I have to scroll down until I get there. But right now I'm going to work on these comment feedbacks. So we have Jeff Sutherland mentions the importance of consistency and transparency. How do we build trust? It's by doing things consistently and doing them transparently. Rhonda Hall mentions that you do what you say you're going to do. That becomes an element of trust. Jerry Bowers echoes that, doing what he says he will do. Holly King, they do what they say. Cliff mentions that actions match what is said. Bruce, again, emphasizing consistency. Phil and Ruth, trust is built by carrying out what they say they're going to do. Karen Hillary, that they do things that are reliable. Lori Peterson, they keep confidences. So in each and every one of these elements, we realize that trust is being built, and the same will be true of God. If David says, he makes me lie down in green pastures, he leads me beside still waters, he restores my soul, he guides me on the right paths, and God doesn't do those things, people aren't going to say, hey, David, what's going on? What are you doing? That's going to go back on God's head. God, why didn't you? And so God acts for his own name's sake, and in the process, what he is doing is he's building up his trustworthiness. He is building up his reputation, his identity, and it should be consistent through what we've seen throughout the whole Bible. So for God to remain trustworthy, he needs to protect the reliability of his name. So if you have your Bibles, we're going to turn to Exodus 32, verses 11 through 14. Exodus 32, 11 through 14. So this is after the golden calf incident, and God has said, you know what, I'm just going to wipe out these people. Moses is going to try and convince God that's not what needs to happen, so this is a pretty high calling to somehow debate with God and think you're going to come out victorious. But here's what Moses does. So this is Exodus 32:11. But Moses implored the Lord his God and said, O Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, it was with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them on the mountains, to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce wrath, change your mind, and do not bring disaster on your people. So we're going to stop there at end of verse 12 there. What would you use as an argument to convince God, let's not kill these people? We might be tempted to, instead of doing a God's name-oriented argument, we might do a people-oriented argument. We might say, they're just such innocent little people. They're ignorant. They're still growing. They're still learning. But look at them. They're so cute. God, how could you do anything so mean to this people? So you could make a people-based argument, but that's not what Moses does here. Moses makes an argument for God's name's sake. You'll notice that particularly in verse 12 when he says, why should the Egyptians say? What Moses is concerned about is God's character, God's reputation, and God's identity. He is concerned that others are going to say, well, this is a God who brings people out, and then whenever they misbehave, he wipes them out. And that's not consistent with the character of God. So Moses, in his appeal is not people-based, but it's character-based. This is who you are, God, and so therefore to do this, it will denigrate your name, it will dishonor your name, because the Egyptians would say these things about them. Yeah, Bruce mentions, that might be the argument. We say, give them a chance, we'll do a little pep talk here, and I'll tell them not to ever do it again, and they won't ever do it again, and so let's give them a second chance. And so instead of that people-based argument, we find Moses making a God-based argument here. God, because of your namesake, how people will speak of it. Dorian mentions the importance of remembering the rainbow, that when God makes promises, for that to be consistent with his name, he has to keep those promises. So I want to talk a little bit here about the difference between actions triggered by a reciprocal relationship and actions that are triggered by character. And so I'm going to tell a little bit of a made-up story here as we look at these things. Jerry Bowers asked the question before we get to this story, where is grace in the Old Testament? And Jerry, my answer to that question is grace is in the character, identity, and nature of God. That when God does things for his name's sake, he does them because his character is one of graciousness. So in other words, for God to honor his character, his name, to do things for his name's sake means that he does things in a gracious way. Probably the easiest example of that would be in Exodus 32, where God reveals himself to Moses, and he mentions that the Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in loving kindness, but not relenting on sending punishment on the people. So in that, what we see is that really is the name of God, and that's what needs to be protected, is this essence or element. But that's a great question, Jerry. I'm glad you answered it. So I'm going to tell a story that's going to tell the difference between reciprocal relationships and actions that are triggered by character. Let's imagine that a journalist comes and visits any church in the world, but we will call it the Billings Church of Christ just for simplicity's sake. And this particular church, they have a habit of when people move, people will go and help them move. So the journalist shows up, and the Smith family is moving, and there are 20 people who are there helping the Smith family load up their truck. And so the journalist begins to ask people, why are you helping the Smith family? And one lady says, well, I was going through a really hard divorce, and Mrs. Smith was always there for me. She would take me out to coffee. She would listen to me talk about what was going on. And when I heard they were moving, I felt like this was the least I could do for them. A young teenage girl helping them move talked about whenever she was struggling with some issues of depression, that Mrs. Smith was always there for her, and so she wanted to be there. A teenage boy talked about Mr. Smith and the positive example he had been, and another man talked about all the ways that Mr. Smith served people. So what the journalist finds out is that the reason there are so many people there helping move is because of a reciprocal relationship, the ways that this family has influenced and touched people. So then the next weekend, the journalist shows up at another house that they're helping to move. This is John Peter's house. But John didn't exactly have a stellar reputation. And only 2 people show up at John's house to help him move. And the journalist asks, why are you helping John move? And the 2 people say basically the exact same thing. It's what I do. When people move, I help them move. So hopefully in this story, you can start to see the difference between a reciprocal relationship, I'm going to do what I do because of what you've done, or character-based actions, which is I do what I do because that's who I am. And as we look at Psalm 23, the importance in recognizing God does these for his name's sake, what God is saying is this is my character, my nature, my attribute to act in these ways. It is not, as Bruce mentions, quid pro quo. It is not prid quo quo. Whoa, that's really hard to say. Quid pro quo. That God's not saying, I will lead you into green pastures if, or because you did X, I will lead you beside still waters. God does these things because that's his character or his nature. Why is it easier to trust a shepherd who acts on the basis of his own name instead of a shepherd who acts on the basis of reciprocal relationships? Or, if you want to make that more complicated, on the basis of quid pro quo. So go ahead and use your comment feature and let me know, why do you think it's easier to trust in a shepherd who does what he does on the basis of his own name rather than as a reciprocal relationship with his people? In what ways is the shepherd's acting for his namesake? Is it more reassuring? Is it more substantial? And why does it create more confidence for us? Go ahead and use your comment feature and let us know what your thoughts on in terms of why it's important that God acts on the basis of who he is, not just on the basis of responding to our relationship with him, our deeds or our actions. And sometimes I will switch over here to our viewing audience here. Sometimes there is awkward silence, and this is one of those moments where people are like, I don't know, Craig. Bruce mentions, I can never deserve all that I need. Yeah, that as if God's treatment of us is on the basis of somehow, we did something good, then that might just run out. Lori mentions we don't want what we deserve. If God really was involved in a reciprocal relationship with us, there's a lot of context where that wouldn't work out. Now, I'm going to have Eric and Mike come over here for a second because I was waiting for a comment like this. Jerry Ford wins. So I'm going to just had a timeout here with you guys, and I'm just going to show Mike and Eric one thing. So sometimes when you're on a device, you'll see a comment that the whole thing doesn't quite fit in there. So see, Jerry says see more. So what you have to do is you touch on that, and then it gives you the full comment there. Okay. All right. So we're going to come back here. Jerry Ford mentions you can know what to expect when it's based on his character. It's not based on my ability to perform and to make him happy. Cliff Slater mentions that it's more consistent and there's more goodness there. Jerry Bowers mentions his love and actions transcend our worth at any given time. If God's treatment of us was on the basis of a reciprocal relationship, that would mean as long as we keep our end of the bargain, then God will keep his end of the bargain. It's kind of like the kind of relationship we have with our grocery stores. as long as you keep providing fresh produce at a price I'm willing to pay, I'm going to keep shopping there. But the moment you stop, I'm going to go shop somewhere else. But because God acts out of his own namesake, that would mean sometimes even whenever I don't deserve any sort of reciprocity, God will give me graciousness, not because I deserve it, but because that's his nature. That's his character, that's his essence. So we're operating on a much more solid foundation when God is doing things out of his name's sake, rather than just simply out of a reciprocal relationship. Makes me think of John 10, where you think about the hired worker. The hired worker, hey, as long as the pay is great and the danger is low, he's around. But when the pay drops and the danger increases, he's gone. But if the shepherd were doing it for his name's sake, even whenever the pay is low, even when the danger is great, that shepherd remains. And so we see this kind of solid foundation of the importance of God's namesake. We'll just look at one other text that illustrates this. This is Ezekiel 36, 22 through 24. Ezekiel 36, 22 through 24. Therefore, say to the house of Israel, thus says the Lord God, it is not for your sake, O house of Israel, that I am about to act, but for the sake of my holy name, which you have profaned among the nations to which you came. I will sanctify my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, and which you have profaned among them. And the nations shall know that I am the Lord, says the Lord God, when through you I display my holiness before their eyes. I will take you from the nations and gather you from all the countries and bring you into your own land. And so as we see Ezekiel 36, 22 and following, again, the motivation here is God is saying, hey, because of who I am, for the sake of the promise I've made, for the sake of my trustworthiness, my credibility, my character, my reputation, I'm going to act in this way. And he even clarifies, it is not for your sake. So God is not saying it's not just simply because I want what's best for you, though God does. What is the primary motive here is this is consistent with the kind of a God that he is. He acts in ways that are faithful. He acts in ways that are trustworthy. And because of that, we can trust him. I think there's a passage, I think it's 1 Timothy, might be 2 Timothy, where it talks about when we are faithless, he is faithful. What that passage is getting at is the same essence of God's character, his name, his reputation. He will be righteous even when we are not. All right. So trust becomes this foundation, and it becomes an especially important foundation when we get to verse 4. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. This darkest valley is kind of a tough thing to translate. It is used in scriptures as a kind of, a metaphor or a euphemism for death. I believe that's Job 10:21-ish. But it's also used in reference to kind of just dark times, difficult, challenging, dangerous times in life. And so the question becomes in Psalm 23, along the spectrum of the valley of darkness or the valley of death, what exactly is David meaning? If we keep it consistent with the shepherd idea, I think that what we are getting at is as a shepherd would lead people into a valley area, you're going to find these kind of large canyon-type rocks. And if you've ever been in a situation like that, you will find that as you're walking through there's a whole lot of precarious things that can happen. Invaders can come at the top of the valley, and you're now in a less defensive position. They can take advantage of that. Flash flooding. Jerry and I were in Zion National Park about a year and a half ago, and that was one thing they kept publicizing, how much rain they're having, likelihood of flash flooding, because if you're in a valley, that's exactly where the water's going to go. And even because the valley doesn't get as much sunlight, and there's all these kind of cracks and crevices along the way, that's a perfect place for a predator animal to hide. You can't see it as you're coming up, or even for robbers to hide. So I think what this valley of darkness, this valley of death is representing is a very dangerous and precarious place, where as soon as you enter into that valley, you know that you're at far more risk than you were in a different place or in a different location in life. But what's really interesting is, as you think about this valley, we have just noticed that he leads us beside still waters. He makes us lie down in green pastures. He restores our soul. He leads us on the right paths. And a part of those right paths is he will lead us into the valley of the shadow of death. Doesn't that seem like the kind of thing that you wish the good shepherd, the shepherd, didn't do? That he said, hey, if you're following me, it's all going to be peaches and ice cream. But here we're going to find out even people who faithfully follow God are going to find themselves in these dangerous and precarious situations. So what do you think are some of the emotions that we feel in the valley of the shadow of death? So go ahead and use your comment feature and just share, what do you think are some of the emotions that people would experience who find themselves in the valley of the shadow of death? So go ahead and share a comment. What do you think are the emotions that you might feel as you walk through this dangerous, precarious, unknown place called the valley of the shadow of death? Yeah, Dorian mentions that he still protects even when we are in the valley, which is absolutely correct. Yeah, Jerry mentions hopelessness. What would be the reasons to think that if somebody did come to the top of the valley and they started shooting arrows down there, what makes me think I'm going to make it out of this whole ordeal alive? So we would have hopelessness. Yeah, Gay, worry. If you've ever watched a movie that's had like this plot unfolding and somebody's opening a creaky door in a dark room, you know what it feels like to not know what's around the next corner. Cindy Pavey mentions, being overwhelmed. It's not that there's just one thing that could go wrong or two things that could go wrong, but there's a whole host of things that could go wrong. Phil and Ruth mentioned the experiencing fear. That you're in a situation that you don't know what's coming, and so you start to feel afraid. Bruce mentions, I believe if I'm translating the emojicon correctly, feel the need to pray. And then you have the emotion of feeling depressed, uncertain of what's happening in that valley. Yeah, Cliff mentioning insecurity. When you're in the valley of the shadow of death, you are so vulnerable to so many things. There's this list of things that could possibly go wrong. And even in spite of all of these feelings, what we recognize is we are in the valley of the shadow of death as he is leading us on the right paths. So God's faithfulness and following God does not mean it will always be still waters. It will always be green pastures. Sometimes the right path will lead us into the valley of the shadow of death. Dorian mentions it's always important to plan ahead mentally and emotionally for valleys. And I think that maybe the way that we do that is just expecting that they will come. And yet even as we expect them, there is often all of these emotions that are joined with that. But if we develop trust in the good times, that may in a unique way sustain us as we trust in God in the valley of the shadow of death. Now, there's a really important transition in verse 4 in the language that is used. Go ahead and look through Psalm 23, 1, 2, and 3, and then look at verses 4 and 5, and let me know if you can notice any sort of a change in tense or change in a shift in the language there. It might be kind of hard to pick out, but I just thought I'd give somebody a chance to look closely at Psalm 23 and tell me if you notice what shifts in terms of language that is needed, that is used there. So Psalm 23, 1, 2, and 3, and then there's a significant shift that begins in verse 4 and it lasts through verse 5. Can anyone see the language shift there? Jerry Bowers mentioned sometimes we create our valley and we need help to get out. That certainly is the case, that we end up in valleys by our own choices. This valley in particular seems to be one wherein God has led us there. This is a valley that God intends us to go through, not a valley of our own creation. But certainly, Jerry, there would be some of those valleys that are of our own creation. So Jerry gets the $5 prize. He notices the change in the pronouns. In verses 1, 2, and 3, we have the third person pronoun. He makes me lie down. He leads me. He restores my soul. He leads me on the paths of righteousness. This language of he is what we might call kind kind of language of testimony, or the language where somebody else is intended to be the audience. So they're talking about God. God is not the direct subject, but here's what he did, and so that you have this element of testimony. But then in verse 4, it switches to the second person you. So now rather than someone else being the audience of the conversation, now God himself is the audience, or the conversation is directed to God when we switch over to you. And this we might call kind of the language of prayer, speaking directly with God. Of the two types of language, the information about God and the direct conversation to God, which would you say is the more personal or intimate language? Verses 1, 2, and 3, or verses 4 and 5 with the you? So go ahead and use your comment feature. And which to you do you think is more vulnerable language? Which is the more intimate language? As you're thinking about that answer, I just wanted to kind of share a illustration story. So let's imagine you've been dating someone for a few months, and you think, you know what, I might like this person. In fact, I might even love them. Is it easier to tell that to a friend? You go out for coffee with a friend and you say, hey, I'm really impressed with my boyfriend or girlfriend, and I think I might even love them. Or is it harder to tell the boyfriend or the girlfriend, I just need you to know that I think I'm falling in love with you? As you think about which of those two conversations is harder, I would assume most people would say speaking directly to the person is the harder, because it's more vulnerable. It's more intimate, and it's a far more personal conversation. And so what we have is a shift in kind of testimonial language, and to a shift into direct language to God. And we need to learn both languages. We need to be able to tell people about what God has done, what we've seen, what we've witnessed, but we also need to be able to talk directly to God. I think sometimes our lives get out of balance when we only do one to the exclusion of the other. So there might be people who talk about God all the time. God did this, and God did this, and God did this, but yet they're so busy talking about God that they don't have time in their lives to talk to God, to rely on him, to depend on him, to have a growing conversation with God. And then there are others who talk with God, who spend their time developing their relationship with God, but they don't talk to others about the ways that God has been at work and the things that God has been doing. And so we recognize God's the need for finding both of these kinds of language, where we express to people what God's been doing, and where we also express to God directly what we've been doing. What's the value of our God talk, quote unquote, including both informational language and intimate language? Why do we want to learn to speak of God and to God? What would be the benefit or the value in learning to develop both types of speech, both speech about God and speech to God? So go ahead and use your comment feature if you have any thoughts about why we would want to develop both kinds of speaking or both kinds of language, why that would be an important part of our faith development. Yeah, Jerry Bowers mentions that it builds us up. And so if people can tell us about what God is up to, about what God is doing, even if I haven't personally experienced that, I can hear your sharing about how God has provided, and that can become a source of encouragement for me. And in that, Dorian mentions deepening relationships, and it can deepen both relationships. It deepens our relationship with each other when we share about what God has been doing, and it also deepens our relationship with God when we talk directly with him, and we share about the ways that he is present and providing. Cindy Pavey mentions that we're told to share our faith with others, but we can't do that if we don't know God. So we cannot share about a relationship that we lack or that we don't have. And so we find a connection and a balance between these two kinds of languages. Now, I think that there's a really important reason why the language shifts in verse 4, because it is in the most dangerous and precarious stages of life that we find God's presence. Mary Gaddy. So here I'll show Eric and Mike here for a minute. I just popped this up here. So I have a text here from Mary. Mary here, God speaks to us in both ways. So that came in via text because Mary is not a Facebook user. So Mary mentions that God speaks to us in both ways. That you do have this, we're imitating or modeling God's form of speech and how he speaks with us. But it's in these dangerous places that when we cannot get out of the dangerous places, what we need to be assured of is that he is there. Not an abstract idea that he is there, but God, I know you are here. And it's that presence of God that allows us to say that I will fear no evil. Why am I not afraid? I'm not afraid because you are here. It's not because you have undone, you've removed all of the fear, or you've removed all of the precarious situations, or you've solved all of the riddles, but it's simply because you are here. That's what now gives me what I need to endure or to move through this valley of the shadow of death. There is a conversation in Exodus 33 where God said to Moses, this is Exodus 33:1, "Go, leave this place, you and the people whom you have brought up out of the land of Egypt, and go to the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your descendants I will give it to you. I will send an angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Go up to a land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go up among you, or I would consume you on the way, for you are a stiff-necked people." So, we might like to sing about, the promised land and about, getting all these things that God has promised. And at this phase in Israel's history in Exodus 33, God says, you know what? Have the land. I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to send an angel in front of you. He's going to make sure you get the land. Just go on and go to the land. But Moses says that's not good enough. There's no point in going into the land. There's no point in possessing the land unless what? Unless God is there with us. So this is in Exodus 33, verses 14 and 15. He said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." And he said to them, "If your presence will not go, do not carry us up from here." So Moses is saying, hey, God, if you do not come, if you're not present with us, there is absolutely no reason for us to even move into this land. And then God promises that he will indeed go with them. So what we are talking about here is not just getting things from God, but recognizing the value of his very presence. Dorian mentions that that's why we are told to pray without ceasing. It's an ongoing conversation with God, and I think that's very true. Holly mentions that David was so close to God, he knew that God would protect him. Yeah, and I like, Holly, that you put in bold, he knew, because that's a part of the foundational faith that we're trying to grow into and to develop into, is that this is the same God who, for his own name's sake, provided for David, is the same God who promises to also provide and care for us. And then, of course, so we long for God's presence in the valley of shadow of death, because it is God's presence who gives us what we need. And then you have this final recognition, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So the shepherd's care is symbolized by both the rod and the staff. The rod is typically used more of as a weapon. So a wolf sneaks in, and the shepherd's going to grab his rod, and he's going to start beating on the wolf. The staff is typically used more for corralling or for correcting, for pulling the sheep in. And so there's these elements of internal protection and external protection. So we're in the valley of the shadow of death. What gives us comfort, what alleviates our fear, is the awareness and the knowledge that God himself is with us. Jerry Bowers mentions that we cannot exist as a nation like his coveted people without the existence of God. That, yeah, we do indeed long for and we crave for God's presence with us, because that's what ultimately gives us our hope and the essence of who we are as the people of God. That's everything I had for class tonight. I will just give a minute or so to see if anyone has any questions or comments before we finish. But again, we've been looking at Psalm 23, verses 3 and 4 tonight. And then we have one more class before I leave for sabbatical on January the 10th, and we will finish off Psalm 23. After January the 10th, we will have 2 rotating guest teachers, and they are hiding right over here in the corner, Mike and Eric. Do you guys have a schedule about who's going to do what yet, or
We haven't
figured
worked
that out? Okay, they're going to work that out. If you have any thoughts or ideas, I'm guessing if there's something people want to study, they can let you know, or any interest or whatever, let them know. But we will be handing the baton over to Mike and Eric while I'm gone on sabbatical. So I'll teach one more class. That's 2 weeks from today, January 10th. And then after that, these 2 hooligans here are going to take over the teaching responsibilities for Sunday nights. Seeing as there's not any questions posting there or anything like that, we will pray, and then we'll be dismissed for the evening. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you. We thank you that you protect us for your own name's sake. We thank you for your good character, your good attributes, your reliability. Teach us what it means to lean on you and to trust in you, to a point that it even begins to alleviate our concerns, our worries, our fears. God, may you do what is necessary to bring glory and honor to your name. And we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of the class. Mitch and Holly, appreciate you guys joining us. Phil and Ruth, thank you. Glad you guys were part of the class tonight. Jerry mentions the other things that he does, Jerry Bowers, other things he does for his namesakes. He forgives us, he leads us, he delivers us. God certainly is an active presence in all of those things. Hope everyone has a wonderful week, and we will catch up or touch base whenever we do. God bless. All right, I'm going to show Mike and Eric how we end a class now here. So we've gone through all of this. Everyone is saying thank you. Yay, appreciate you guys. Gay, I don't know what that means. We live you all. There may have been a typing error there. We love you all. Appreciate you guys. So when it's time to end the class, I'm going to come right here.